Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Extranets in Office 365 EUM and Azure B2B webinar. My name is Peter Carson. I'm going to be presenting for today. I'm the president of Extranet User Manager and Envision IT. I'm also a SharePoint MVP and a partner seller with Microsoft Canada. I've been working with the SharePoint space right back to the 2001 days on premises, and then more recently SharePoint Online. My contact information is up in here. We're going to be posting these slides up in our events section. I'll include the links at the end as well. So if you want to get all the contact details, they'll all be available in the slide deck. We're also recording the session, so if you have colleagues who weren't able to join us, they can view that on demand after the fact. Again, that'll be up on the event page. Not on the line here today. He's actually away on vacation right now. Denesh Sohan is our Director of Products. He really runs the Extranet User Manager team. I do have on the line, though, Logan Guest, who is our Sales Associate in charge of Extranet User Manager. So if you've got any questions about licensing, pricing, partnering, implementation, what have you, Logan is your point person on that. And then he can certainly draw either myself or Denesh in if there's deeper solution architecture, technical questions that you'd like to have answered. All right, so let's start with a quick run through of our agenda for the next hour. And I'm going to try and keep it right to the hour or slightly before to make sure we're respectful of everybody's time. We're going to start with a quick introduction to extranets, just to level set folks who maybe aren't familiar with all the nuances of that. And then we're going to dive right into Azure Active Directory B2B. We're actually going to show you some of the new features that are available in the B2B portal out of the box straight from Microsoft. And then we're going to contrast that with our Extranet User Manager product that fits on top of that, talk about some of the gaps that we fill, the features that we provide as part of that, why you should be interested in that from a governance and permissions point of view, and ultimately how that's licensed. And then we'll take you right into an actual demo from an Office 365, sharing through Azure B2B using Extranet User Manager. That'll wrap it all up from there. All right, so without further ado, let's just dive right in. If you've attended my webinars before, you've seen these slides before. Apologies, I just want to make sure everybody's level set from this point of view. You know, some people wonder, well, what is an extranet? It is a website that's accessible to users outside of the corporate network. So whether those are partners, customers, vendors, what have you, you can share information with them. They can collaborate with you in a secure way. And it can be delivered in a number of different ways. It could be part of your public website that's secured. And we actually do that on the extranetusermanager.com site if you want to download the trial version or have a look at some of the more detailed technical documentation. It requires you to create an account, sign in first before you can get into those secure areas. It could be part of the corporate intranet. Again, we do that. We use Office 365 and SharePoint Online for our corporate intranet. We have client sites, project sites, and we allow our clients to come in and share into that as well. Or it could be a standalone purpose-built extranet. We're going to share a number of different examples as we go through here and talk about some of those scenarios as well. In terms of where a SharePoint, specifically extranet, can be built out, whether it's a secure publishing portal or a collaboration space, it could be installed on-premise on your SharePoint server, or it could be hosted up in the cloud in Office 365. Our focus for today is going to be on the Office 365 side of things, but Extranet User Manager absolutely supports the on-premises SharePoint server model as well. And in terms of our product itself, it can be installed on-premise or hosted up in Azure. We have a multi-tenant software as a service offering to our product that I'll talk more about as we get into the licensing section. And likewise, you can mix and match, install our product on-premise, connect to Office 365, vice versa. There's a number of different scenarios that you can do that in. So one of the first things that we ask clients when we're talking about doing an extranet for them is just getting a sense of, well, who's going to be coming into that extranet? Are you a not-for-profit, charitable organization? Maybe you've got volunteers, donors, members. You're a for-profit. You've got customers. Any type of extranet often can interact with vendors, suppliers. You might have a board of directors portal. You could be government, dealing with citizens, education, scientific, dealing with researchers, property management is a common scenario, tenants, partners, lots of different scenarios. And any one extranet can mix and match a number of these through here. So as we go deeper in that discussion, beyond just who's coming into the extranet, we typically want to understand, well, what sort of things are they going to see when they come into that? Does everyone see the same information? Is it a secure portal that is consistent for all users? Or is there different areas? Maybe it's a customer portal and customers see their own customer information that's specific to them. Maybe they even have their own sites or site collections within that portal. Is there some sort of member database that we need to interface with? Are you using, say, Dynamic CRM or an ERP system or other ways that you want to maintain that member information? And how do people come into the extranet? Is it invitation only where you know who those extranet users are? Or can people self-register, go through some approval process? And if so, how does that approval process work? And then ultimately, how, is it just the extranet they're coming into, or is there other systems as well? While we target Extranet User Manager for SharePoint and Office 365, it's not exclusive to that. We actually have quite a number of clients using it in a single sign-on scenario with a number of different both SaaS systems and internal custom developed systems. So lots of things to think about, some questions to go from there. Then from a technology point of view, we are a Microsoft partner. We're very focused on the Microsoft stack. So SharePoint really is our go-to from a core of the extranet portal platform point of view, and whether that's on-premise or in the cloud as part of Office 365. Obviously, we're leveraging Microsoft Azure. That's the focus for today's talk with the B2B, which is a feature of Azure. And then there's our EUM or Extranet User Manager product itself. Okay, so let's start with the out-of-the-box experience from Microsoft. What can you do without our product, and what does that look like? So the first incarnation was Office 365 external sharing, and this is the idea that you can go into your SharePoint Online portal and you can invite users from outside of your organization to share with that. And that's actually gotten a fair bit of sophistication over the years. It's been a feature that's been out there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, I guess. As those external users come in, they have to use the Microsoft login form. You can brand that and customize that to your brand. Those external users have to have either a Microsoft account or be Office 365 subscribers themselves. And similar scenarios on the B2B side, and we'll talk a bit deeper on that when we get into that side. So owners need permissions rights to be able to invite users to have that ability to share. That does create some governance challenges, and we see this as maybe not the best solution from a corporate-wide enterprise type of extranet solution. It's more of a lightweight solution. A lot of our clients actually turn off the external sharing feature primarily from a governance concern point of view. Okay, so then let's talk about Azure AD B2B. So this first launched onto the scene in September of 2015, so a little over a year ago now. It was a fairly rudimentary interface in the initial incarnation. If you used it, basically you had to go into the Azure AD portal, upload CSV files with your lists of users, and they would get invited through an email process and be able to come into your site from there. It worked, but it wasn't something that you would ever delegate and give to your business users. It was something that IT maybe needed to manage themselves. So it wasn't great from that perspective. But back at Ignite in this September, so about a year after the initial launch, there was some pretty major announcements from Microsoft in terms of how they've built and extended onto the B2B portal. If you've worked in Azure, you'll recognize that there's actually 2 Azure portals. There's the classic and there's the new portal. The classic portal still has the old CSV file upload stuff in it. The new portal is where you'll find all the new B2B features, and that's what we're going to be using for our demonstration purposes here today. So to give you a quick sense of what is Azure AD B2B, it is quite simple. The idea is that your partners are invited into your Azure AD. So at this point, we're not even talking about Office 365. We're just talking about bringing them into Azure AD. Now, once they're in your Azure AD, yes, you can grant them rights either individually, or you can even put them into groups that belong to your Azure AD and manage permissions into your SharePoint Online presence. Now, from a licensing point of view, the real advantage to using B2B with SharePoint Online is that it doesn't incur any additional licenses. Neither does the external sharing feature that I just talked about previously as well. Both of those you can invite in an unlimited number of users, pay no additional license fees for those, as long as they're not part of your organization. You can't cheat and say, well, we've got some staff that maybe don't have AD accounts and we're going to bring them as external users. That doesn't fly from a legal point of view. So they need to be arm's length from your organization, true external users. Now, basically all the access is controlled through Azure AD. You can remove them from your Azure AD, in which case their access to your extranet is immediately revoked. So that's nice from that point of view. But the flip side is actually really nice as well, that when the partner leaves the partner organization that their Azure AD is associated with, that access is lost as well. So if I've invited somebody in from a partner of ours, that particular person leaves that partner organization, you can be pretty sure that that partner organization is going to shut down their AD account and their Azure AD account as part of the offboarding process pretty quickly for that user. As soon as that happens, they lose access to my extranet portal as well, because they need that partner credential to work to be able to come into my extranet. And this has been a classic issue with a lot of extranets, that if you create accounts within the extranet portal itself, there's often difficulty in determining whether those users still work for those organizations or not. You need to do things like periodic password changes or validation emails to make sure that, yes, they do still have an account over there. This is the more seamless way of doing it. Now, the partner companies don't need to have their own Azure AD. It actually provides a sign-up experience, and we'll talk more about that as well, for those partners if they're not using Azure AD themselves. But the real value is if they are using Azure AD, they're going to use the same credentials that they use to come into their corporate internal resources to come into your extranet. So, I've already talked about some of this, the new features that came out at Ignite. You can now add individual users without using a CSV directly through the Azure portal. A big one actually was the support for consumer email addresses. So there's two, there's a business to business that we're going to be talking about here today, and a business to consumer. And when B2B first came out, they were quite clear that we were not going to support, or Microsoft was not going to support consumer email addresses. That was what B2C was for. And the reality is there's a lot of B2B scenarios where people still use consumer email addresses. You may have, say partners or vendors who are one-person shops, and maybe they don't have their own email domain. They're just using a Hotmail or a Gmail or an Outlook.com account, but that is their commercial email address. So there is now support for those consumer email addresses. And this was a blocker that was actually preventing a number of our projects going forward. So that's a big win from that point of view. The other really big one for us is that there's now an API for building customization. So when we first started working with B2B back in the spring, we actually had to build browser automation to drive the Azure portal to be able to interact with it, because there was no API. So at Ignite, they announced there was an API there, and today we're actually going to be showing an early release version of our new EUM that's leveraged to build on that API. We haven't actually put it out in market yet. We're actually going to be doing some of the QA as part of the session here today, and I'm going to invite everybody in to participate in with that. So there's some links there to the B2B session that was delivered by Sarat, who's the product manager at Microsoft in Redmond on B2B. By all means, go have a look at those and check out some of the interesting content in there as well. Okay, so I already mentioned some of this, that from a B2B and Office 365 point of view, you can grant access into your SharePoint Online to those partner B2B users. They're considered external by Microsoft, which means you don't need a subscription for them, and you can apply permissions to Azure AD groups that you manage in your Azure AD into your SharePoint Online. So you can kind of do all the permissions management and membership management in Azure AD and then apply that in SharePoint Online. So again, from a governance point of view, that works quite well from that perspective. Now with Extranet User Manager as part of that, what we'll talk about later is how we can then manage the membership of that group and properly delegate that down to the business owners through Extranet User Manager. All right. So let's talk about the different experiences in Azure B2B. So as I'm going through, depending on how I, as a partner user, currently interact with Azure AD, I'm going to have a different experience. So let's say I'm already an existing Office 365 user, and anybody who's got Office 365 automatically has Azure AD under the hood. You have to have it. That's how the authentication works with Office 365. It might be a cloud-only account, it might be a password synced account through Azure AD Connect, or it might be full federated account through ADFS. Doesn't matter. In any of those scenarios, when you come in as a partner, you're going to log in with your Azure AD credentials the same way you log into your own Office 365 to come into my extranet portal. So that's quite ideal. I can have one browser open. I can be in my corporate portal in one tab. I can open another tab, go to my partner site, and not have to sign in, not have to worry about in private browsers, because Office 365 gets confused if you run multiple identities against the same browser. Doesn't work. So all that confusion goes away. That's fantastic. Now let's say I do have a true business email domain. So it's not a Hotmail, it's not a Gmail account, it's my corporate business email domain, but it's not in Azure AD. We run Exchange on premises, we do something else for email, we just haven't made that move to the cloud yet. What happens there is when the first person from that organization accepts an invitation to come in through B2B, what Microsoft does behind the scenes is they actually create an Azure AD tenant for that email domain. Microsoft provides a whole process to allow them to create their password. They can provide their name and their country. There's password reset capability there if they forget their password later. And then they use that cloud account to come into your extranet portal. Let's say a year from now, you've got a bunch of users coming in from that organization. There's that tenant that was created behind the scenes, and they decide to move to Office 365 themselves. There's actually a process that they can go through where they can claim that tenant that was created behind the scenes for them and turn it into a fully managed Azure AD tenant. And as they do that, they can decide whether those people that have already created accounts can continue to use those same passwords, or are they going to connect them up through Azure AD Connect and make them password synced accounts. All that happens fairly seamlessly. Let's say we convert everybody to use organizational accounts and cloud synced passwords. They still come into your portal using that same account. They just use the different credentials that were provided by their organization when they did that Office 365 migration. The third and last scenario is they have a consumer email account. I'm using Hotmail, Outlook.com, something like that. What happens there is if I don't have a Microsoft account associated with that email address, again, Microsoft will take them through a process to convert that account into a Microsoft account. Once they've done that, they can sign in with that Microsoft account into my extranet as a partner that way. So that's slightly different user experience depending on the users that you've got, but it allows all three scenarios to come into your Azure AD and ultimately into your Office 365 SharePoint Online. So what I'd like to do here is take a quick pause, have a sip of water, and let everybody answer a quick poll to get a sense of how people are interacting with Azure AD today. So I'm just going to launch this poll out. So there's four options. You can answer all if you want. First being, have you used Azure AD B2B before yourself? Has anybody had some experience either with the early preview through the old portal or is aware of and has played around with the new portal? And second being, are you considering or planning on using Azure AD B2B? And that's why you're here today, is to learn more about it. Third one, are you currently using Office 365, which kind of answers the next question, because if you use Office 365, you have an Azure AD organizational account automatically as part of that. Don't worry about that, but if you don't use Office 365, you do use Azure AD, want to capture that as well, just to get a sense of what that looks like. So let me give you another 10, 15 seconds just to capture everybody there. All right, let me just close that out. And I'm just going to share that so everybody can have a look at what that looks like. So only 11% currently using Azure AD B2B, either tried it out or done something with it from that point of view. So to everybody else, welcome. This is a great chance to understand what this is all about. More than half considering or planning on using Azure AD B2B. Perhaps that number will go up at the end of the session once you have a better understanding of what it's all about. 3/4 currently using Office 365. Not surprising, you're in Office 365. This is an obvious way to do sharing with that. And about a third have Azure AD organizational accounts that could be outside of Office 365 as well. So let me hide that and continue with the process from here. Okay, so what I want to start with is just give you a quick sense of what the Azure B2B experience looks like through the new portal. I'm not going to go all the way through it. I'm just going to give you a quick look at what that looks like. So let me flip over to another window here. And actually, let me start right back at the beginning here. So when I first come into my new Azure portal, so portal.azure.com is the URL that you need to go to, and I come down into my Azure Active Directory here, I get my overview, and I can come into my users and groups and have a look at all users. So this is going to show me a blended view. I've got this is a demo account that I'm going to be using for my demos here. I've got my main user who's actually in the tenant, pcarson at eumdemo.onmicrosoft.com, but then I've also invited in my peter.carson at extranetusermanager.com as an external user. So let's start actually by having a look at that user there. So I can click on that, see all the profile and group membership information, so I can see that this particular user is a member of this EUM underscore SharePoint group. So this is a group that I've created in my Azure AD under EUM demo, but I've actually made the external partner user a member of that. So then I can apply permissions in my SharePoint, and I'll show you that in a minute, to that EUM underscore SharePoint group. So let's actually flip over here. I've got my eumdemo.sharepoint.com site. So this is our Office 365 SharePoint Online site that I want to bring my partners into. So if I look at my site settings and site permissions for this site, we'll see that that EUM underscore SharePoint is listed as a domain group, and it's been given read access into this site. So once I've set up this group and this permission in SharePoint, I'm basically done in SharePoint. I don't need to do anything more in here. I basically manage the membership of the group over in Azure AD here. So let's say I wanted to come out of the group here. Let's come back to my all users and just say add. So basically I can go through this process. This is the same screens I would use if I was adding a cloud account for the tenant itself. But what I'll do is I'll start putting in my Peter at envisionit.com, which is another email that I have. And you can see here, it flipped and changed and said, okay, Peter at envisionit.com will be added as a guest. And I can put a message in here that will go out as part of the invitation. I can decide what groups I want to put them in. So I could say, well, I want to put them in that EUM underscore SharePoint group. There it is. So I can select that and say create. Now I'm not going to go through the whole process because I'm actually going to take you through this process through Extranet User Manager in a minute with this account, but I wanted to give you a sense of what this looks like in the B2B portal. And at that point, I'm going to get an invitation email from Microsoft with a link to accept to then come into that portal site. Okay, so let's just throw away those edits. Okay. So what are some of the limitations that we see with the current preview from this point of view? So originally when B2B came out, there was no delegation whatsoever. So you had to be a global administrator in Azure to be able to use B2B. So that was a biggie. If you're a global administrator, that means you have full rights to everything in Azure. You can delete virtual machines, you can remove storage, you can incur charges. You know, that's not the type of credentials that you would give to a business owner to say, here, go invite some external people in. They've now added in the ability to delegate. That was part of the Ignite announcements that came out back in September of this year. So delegation is now supported. It does require some PowerShell to grant that delegation right to the user, but once you've done that, they can come in the portal to do that. Now it is still an all or nothing, so once you've delegated the user management, it means they can manage all users in Azure AD from an external user point of view. That can make sense for some scenarios, others not so much. So depends on what you're looking to do. Let's say you've got a board of directors site and you've got 25 external users that need to come into that particular site in SharePoint Online, and you want the board secretary to be able to manage those external users. You could delegate access to them, and they could invite people in, and that would be a reasonable scenario for that. But let's say you now add another extranet to that where, in addition to the board site, now you've created a partner site, and you've got somebody in the sales partner team that needs to invite users in there. Well, you could delegate them access, but they could then change your board members on your board site. It's probably not a good thing. You don't want them to be able to suddenly invite people into the board site. So that granular delegation is something that doesn't come out of the box as part of the B2B. That's something that we address through our Extranet User Manager. I'll talk more about that. It is managed through the Azure portal. I'm starting to find my way better through the new portal. I myself can find it overwhelming sometimes, so imagine from a business user's point of view, that can be quite overwhelming. It's a very complex portal. There's a lot of power there, but it's not necessarily intuitive and easy to use from that point of view. There's also no self-registration or approval process. So if you want people to be able to sign up for your site and then go through a prescribed approval where different groups approve different users, again, that's something you need to build yourself. That's something we provide as part of the Extranet User Manager product. There's no integration to other line of business systems. I'll show you some examples where we do this, where we actually live update into Dynamics CRM, or we pull data from, say, JD Edwards or other ERP systems. So that ability to do that, again, that's customization. Even in our product, it's customization, but it's certainly something much easier to do. Also, no integration to on-premises AD. This is an area that we're still working on. It's still in the backlog on the Extranet User Manager side. But the idea is if you invite somebody in as a B2B user, and you create a corresponding on-premises Active Directory account, you don't actually give them credentials for that account. They don't know that that account exists, but you can use the Azure application proxy to basically allow those users to come into some of your on-premise systems. And under the hood, those systems don't need to be rewritten to be claims aware. They can consume the Windows identity of that matching account. So hold that thought, and we're going to talk in a later webinar, probably early in the new year, more about that scenario, but that's quite an interesting one from a single sign-on point of view. So let's talk more about the Extranet User Manager product. So it is, as I've mentioned several times now, quite focused on the delegation idea. The person that holds the keys to managing those external users should be the person that's interacting with those users. If it's the board secretary for the board, it's the sales manager for the partnering. Those are the folks that should be inviting people, approving people, deactivating people when appropriate and such from there. You don't want IT to be a gatekeeper in here. And IT themselves don't want to be that gatekeeper. They got enough on their plate without dealing with random different requests from different groups to set up partner accounts. It does provide the self-registration and approvals, and we'll actually walk through that process. Now, some of the other features, it does provide a full identity management as well, so it can create accounts rather than use B2B. That can be certainly used from an on-premises SharePoint point of view. Originally, we built this also to work with Office 365, which it supports. The challenge there is that from a licensing point of view, because we're not coming in through the external sharing or through the B2B, our users, if they're provisioned through our identity management, are actually not considered external users. So you have to buy subscriptions for those users. We've got some clients that are using that that are charitable organizations. They don't actually pay for their Office 365 licenses. It works for them. Anybody else, it's pretty much a showstopper for them to say, you know what, if we're going to have thousands of users coming in externally, we can't have license costs for all those users. We need to use B2B to eliminate those license costs. But if you are using the login, it does provide a simplified login, both for internal and external users, forgotten password processes and such from there. If you're curious about that, have a look at some of our past webinars. We dive deeper into what that experience looks like. So more specifically around Extranet User Manager and B2B together, how do those work together? So we provide the self-registration, the profile management, the delegation. So effectively, business owners can create users, can create groups if they have the rights for that, and we'll talk about the different roles within Extranet User Manager. And behind the scenes, we set all that up in Azure AD. Currently, we don't actually send the invitations. That's actually a backlog item that we're just working on. It's one of the last things on the getting the Graph API working in there. And we'll talk about what that looks like. But that is the plan quite shortly, and we'll show you how we already have the support for customizing those emails and what that looks like. Azure AD will manage the login process, and then we manage the group membership that ultimately you leverage for permissions, just like I was showing you before with that EUM SharePoint group that's been granted permissions in the Office 365 site. Okay, so let's take a deeper walk through the Extranet User Manager features, and then we're actually going to go through a demo and show you live what that looks like. So the first is branding. Branding is very important. We're going to show you a number of different sites, like the Kinross one that we have up here. They have a very strong global brand. They want to maintain that through the whole user experience, right from registration, all the end user pages and such. That's very important. So we have a branding master for our end user pages. It's built with Bootstrap, so it's fully responsive. We'll talk more about that as well. Maintaining that brand is very easy to achieve with our product. Self-registration is probably one of the biggest features that drive people to our product, that ability to create customizable registration experiences, not just for initial registration, but also to come back and update your profile as part of that as well. We provide an out-of-the-box registration form that I'm going to show you in a minute, but that can be customized. You can add fields, you can remove fields, you can integrate it with back-end systems, get your own approval workflow going as part of that. And the way that we do that is when you purchase the product, we actually provide a full source code license to the registration project itself. So if you've got .NET developers, you're comfortable doing those customizations yourself, you're fully within your rights to do that. If you'd like us to do those services for you, we do that for most of our clients, I would say, in terms of working with you to gather your requirements and then building out the customized registration. If you're a partner organization and you're looking to provide those services to your clients, again, absolutely support that. We've worked with a number of partners to get them up to speed to understand the architecture of Extranet User Manager and how they do those branding and registration customization projects. Delegation, also a very important feature, this idea that you want to delegate the management of the users down to the business. You don't want IT as the gatekeeper in there. And this can even be delegated externally. You can say, you know what, we're going to allow the external organizations themselves, maybe there'll be a super user or an administrator within each partner organization, and they can actually decide who else to bring into the organization from there. We're actually building a portal project right now for Ontario MD, part of the Ontario Medical Association. That scenario exactly, whereas a doctor can come in and self-registration and create an account for themselves, and there's some validation against back-end systems to make sure that they are a registered doctor in the province. Once they've done that, they can then invite in an administrator in their organization and mark them to then be able to invite in other people within. So if you think about a typical doctor's office as a GP, there's one or more doctors, there's a number of admin staff, and there's a bunch of nurses. They all need access to the portal. Once the first person has set that up, they can then manage the rest of the people in that office. So it's a nice way to do that delegation. And we can put up security walls so that within those organizations, they only see the users that belong to their organization. They don't see other partner organizations' users. NAV Canada does the same thing with the airlines where say Air Canada or WestJet, which are Canadian airlines, create an initial administrator account with NAV Canada in their portal, and then they can create additional users from there. I already mentioned briefly on the adaptive design side, so all of the end user pages are built using Twitter Bootstrap from a responsive CSS framework point of view. So they work well whether you're on a desktop, a tablet device, a smartphone. They adapt and respond according to the device. And again, I can show you quickly what that looks like. The product itself can be installed on premises or it can be hosted up in Azure. So we have our own multi-tenant hosting that we provide to clients that we host in Azure. It's managed by us, but we have a third-party NOC that provides 7/24 monitoring and remediation against that. So if you want a fully cloud solution, you're using Office 365 for your SharePoint side of things, we can provide the other side of that through our hosting. If you'd rather install it on premises, maybe you've got some back-end systems that you want to wire it into. A lot of our clients do it that way if there's deep integration into their systems. The product is fully multilingual. We are a Canadian company, so English and French is very important to us here in Canada. But we've had clients like Kinross translated into half a dozen different languages. So we've taken all the text in the application and pulled it out into resx files, which makes it easy to do translations. In fact, you as the customer implementing EUM can do those translations themselves. Even the English text, if you want to update some of the copy and text on there, you can do that through those resx files. All right, so let's talk a bit more about governance and permissions and how that drives why you'd want a product like Extranet User Manager. So governance is actually an overused word in SharePoint projects. It gets thrown around a lot. It means a lot of different things to different people. I mean, in my sense, it's really defining roles and responsibilities, and everything from a communications plan to a training plan becomes part of that governance plan. It's not just permissions in terms of who's allowed to do what, but why should they do what? Just because you have rights, say, to change the master page on our corporate portal doesn't mean you as a developer should go ahead and do that. I mean, there is processes that should be followed and checklists that should be followed. Does that need to go to the working committee or the steering committee for approval before it goes forward? That's all part of the governance plan. And permissions are a key part of this. If you leave permissions wide open on a SharePoint, it often becomes a Wild West. People break inheritance all over the place, set up unique permissions, and you just lose track of who has access to what in the portal and how you're going to manage it. So it really can get out of hand if you leave it open from that point of view. So that's where we really focus in. If you think about permissions in SharePoint, you can apply it at different levels. You can apply it at the site level, at the list or the library, at the folder, at the item level. When we're speaking with clients doing SharePoint implementations, we strongly encourage them to only manage permissions at the top two levels. Ideally at the site level, maybe there's a reason to have lists or libraries within the site that are only available to certain groups, but don't start going to the folder or the item level. It just gets too crazy from a permissions management point of view. So with that being said, one of the things is, well, how do we apply those permissions? We can apply them directly to users, or we can use groups. Another big governance is only apply permissions to groups. Don't put people in and directly assign permissions to them, because those people will change, roles will change, and then you have to go find all those spots where those have been applied, rather than saying, okay, we've applied permissions in a bunch of places to a group, and if I change the membership of that group, all those places automatically update from there. Now, groups can mean a lot of things. It could be a SharePoint group, Office 365 groups, which under the hood are Azure AD groups. Could be a cloud-only group. Could be a group that syncs from your on-premise Active Directory. Could be a group that gets created through EUM. So, some confusion around that term. You need to decide what a group means and where you're going to manage that. So one of the things to think about from a governance perspective is separating who can manage permissions from who can manage group membership. You absolutely want to empower your business users to be able to define who can be members of their groups to interact with their sites from there. I mean, that was the big reason for SharePoint groups. It was the business as a whole pushing back, saying, we don't like using Active Directory groups because we have to go through IT to update the membership of those groups, and it's too hard. We're not agile enough, we can't react. So we want to use SharePoint groups to do that. Problem is those SharePoint groups live just within a site collection in SharePoint. They're not really a good broad way of doing that group membership management. So putting those up into Azure AD, but still allowing the business to manage the membership of them really makes a lot of sense. And that's where our product comes in, that as you're managing groups through Extranet User Manager, under the hood, you're managing them in Azure AD. But you want to lock down the control of the permissions. Typically we see some sort of site provisioning process where when somebody requests a new site, it gets set up, the permissions get applied, the groups get created, and then they get control of their site, but not control of their permissions. But they get control of the membership of the groups, which effectively lets them decide who comes into that site. So it's a nice balance from a governance point of view. From a licensing point of view, how do we sell the Extranet User Manager product? We try and keep it quite simple. I know there's a lot of complexity in the Microsoft world and a lot of vendors around the licensing. What we do is we say, okay, if you want an on-premise installation, there's two flavors, standard and enterprise. And the only difference between them is, are you authenticating just to one system, or are you going against multiple systems? If you're using EUM from a single sign-on into many different systems beyond SharePoint, that's an enterprise. In the future, when we provide the support for the Azure application proxy and you provide single sign-on into other back-end systems, or you have other cloud-based systems beyond Office 365, again, that's an enterprise. But if all you have is a single Office 365 tenant that you want to bring people into, that's a standard edition. So that's a quick way to understand the difference between the two. If you install on-premise, the license fee is a one-time purchase, perpetual license. You can choose not to get the software assurance. Basically, software assurance provides you rights to all the updates. It also provides you the rights to run dev and test instances on-premise without purchasing additional licenses for those. If you don't purchase the SA, you only have rights for the production instance. Alternatively, we can run the whole thing for you in a hosted environment. The same standard and enterprise scenarios apply. Pricing is per month at that point, and that includes all aspects. So that's the Azure cost for hosting it. That's the license fee built into that, the software assurance built into that, the monitoring, remediation. It's a full suite package from that point of view. So all the pricing details are up on our website. We're very public from that point of view. So lots of different clients that we can talk about. You've seen a few screenshots of different ones as we've been going through. What I do want to do though right now is jump into the demo, and then we'll come back to some of those different clients there. So I'm going to take you through an Office 365 and EUM Azure AD B2B demonstration. Now I'm actually going to take this link here. Let me just go ahead and click on that one. This is our out-of-the-box registration form. So this is what registration looks like with no customization. So we've got name and email as the only required fields. We've got a bunch of profile fields that you can add and remove from. Do that, and we've got a Google reCAPTCHA at the bottom. Let me actually take this link here, and we're going to actually crowdsource this a little bit. So let me chat this out to everybody. So feel free, go ahead, click on that link. You'll get to the same page that I've got up here. This is actually being run in our multi-tenant Azure environment. So it's the same environment that we do our production customer accounts in. Each tenant is separated and isolated. They each have their own separate SQL database. So there's no sharing of data from that point of view, but they run in one farm of IIS boxes. So let me actually walk through the registration process here. So I'm going to register with that peter@envisionit.com account that I took you through the scenario in the Azure portal before. We didn't finish it, so I'm actually going to finish it here. So let me just answer the CAPTCHA. I can leave all the other fields blank. You can define rules as to what's required, what's not. And what this is doing right now is it's actually writing a record into our EUM database as a pending approval account. So it hasn't done anything with B2B yet. Okay, so this is going to generate two emails. One of them goes to me as the person registering, saying thanks for registering on the site. The other one is to the approver to approve that account. So let me just see if those have come through yet to me. Yeah, I've got them here. Okay, so here's the first one. This one went to me as the person registering, saying thanks for requesting an account. Once your account's approved, you'll receive an email. We actually need to update the copy in here because we're not going to be sending instructions to set your password. This is actually going to be the one that will take them through the B2B invitation process. And I'll show you in a minute how you can actually customize the copy on these emails. The second one, actually I see a couple here, so we've got a few people registering, thank you. Here's the one for my account here. Now, if you've gone to our website today, apologies, we are actually having some problems with our reverse proxy, so you won't actually be able to come into our public sites for the next hour or two. We're actually fixing up some stuff there. What I'm going to need to do is actually copy this hyperlink, and I have to remote in because I'm doing this webinar from home back into our office so I can get around those problems. Okay, so before I paste that link in, let me take you through a bit more of the scenario. So let's imagine that I'm a user in the organization and I'm coming into our corporate intranet in Office 365. Now we've set our Office 365 up so it auto redirects from a home realm discovery point of view right to our ADFS because we're using Active Directory Federation services for our internal users to authenticate into our SharePoint Online. So it comes right up to my ADFS screen. We've actually left it so it doesn't auto sign in. You can actually skip this and have this page not come up. But from a demo point of view, from a demonstrating ADFS, it's actually nice to have this page come up. So I've got my credentials. That's authenticating me against my internal Active Directory account, and then it's passing that token back over to Office 365. So now in our Envision IT main staff portal. Let me actually open another link here. And let's say I want to go into our Extranet User Manager portal. And the first thing I'm going to see here is it's going to bring up the EUM login page. Give that a second to fire up. Now, I may have credentials directly in Extranet User Manager that I can use, but we want to use the same single sign-on process for our staff to come in. So I've got a link here to go to the staff login. Now again, in Extranet User Manager, we can have this page get skipped. We can do IP address detection to say, oh, you're inside the network, you must be a staff member, and it should take you straight through the ADFS login process. But again, we've left that turned off for now, just so we can kind of walk people through and talk the whole scenario through. So I'll click on the staff login link. It's actually going over to our ADFS. Because I already logged in once, it just auto logs me in, and I'm now in as P. Carson in our Extranet User Manager product. So now that I'm here, let me actually paste that link that came into the email for me to edit that user. So this is the account that I registered with with my peter@envision.com, and if we come down a little bit here, we'll see it's a pending approval account. So I can review and update any of the profile information for that user. I can make a decision to say, should I or should I not let this user into my portal? If I'm happy with that, I have a couple of choices. I can make them an active user, in which case they're actually going to create an account in our system and log in that way, but I don't want to do that in this scenario because I don't want to pay for a subscription for that user. So I want to use the Azure B2B scenario here and go ahead and bring them in that way. I have to put them in a group, go ahead and save settings. And that basically puts that user into a queue to be put up into Azure B2B. Now, I mentioned in our earlier version of the product, we basically had a console application that interacted with the old Azure portal to upload those users. We haven't done the full suite of changes to actually bring that across to say, okay, let's actually build that into the core EUM. So we still have that console application. I've got it running every minute, but I'm going to kick it anyways just to make it run a little quicker. All right. So let me have a look at my email now, and what I should see is the invitation coming through from Microsoft. There we go. So as I mentioned, currently this is coming directly from Microsoft, and there is limited ability to customize the look and feel of this email directly through Azure AD, but what we want to do is actually use our own email process. So if I come back to my Extranet User Manager screen for a second here, I'm actually logged into this as a configuration editor, and I'll talk about the roles in a minute, which gives me the ability to update all of those emails. So that pending approval email, that said you'll get instructions to set your password. I mean, this is where I would update that to get the proper B2B language in there. Likewise, we have a welcome email that gets sent out. What we want to do is provide the support for sending the welcome email ourselves, and the API supports this, that we can then do that on behalf of Microsoft and have that invitation process come through. Actually, there's one other change I need to do here. I just realized, hang on a sec. Too many windows to flip around. I put that user into the wrong group. So let's have a look at peter@envisionit.com. I actually needed them in this EUM SharePoint group. I'll go ahead and save that. And what we can do actually, let me go back to the Azure AD portal. So that was this window. No. Sorry, like I said, too many windows going here. Here it is. Okay, so let's have a look at my all users. So here's my peter@envision.com. So that's been added through the Extranet User Manager process. And I can see that they're now in that EUM_SharePoint group. So everything's queued up and set from that point of view. Okay, so let's come back to my main window here. So I'm logged into my own Office 365. Now I want to go into the eumdemo.sharepoint.com Office 365 using my partner credentials here. So what I need to do is use this invitation here. So let me grab this link. And it may seem a little confusing to you watching me go through here. It's because I'm wearing multiple hats, kind of showing you all the different moving pieces. Obviously, the external partner would only see part of this, and it's much more seamless from that point of view. So I've clicked on the link. It says, well, to access apps from Envision IT, I need to sign in with the email address that I was invited in. This is an important thing. Originally in the external sharing in SharePoint, somebody could accept the invitation under a different email, which is a big problem. Now this is locked in tight, it has to come in directly through that. In fact, it knows that under the hood, even though this is the email address I generally use, my account is actually slightly different from that. It's gotten that from Azure AD under the hood. So I click next on that. It says, okay, we're going to get your account ready. So now it's creating the linkage between my Envision IT account and the partner account that's in the eumdemo.sharepoint.com. Now this is a bug on the B2B side. I'm actually working through getting a couple of these scenarios together so I can go back to Redmond with them. It doesn't matter whether you invite people in through EUM or directly through B2B. There's still some timing issues there that when you complete that invitation and then you go to use that account in SharePoint, I think there's some sync processes in the back in Office 365 that haven't quite caught up with things from there. Because you see, I just repeated that same link, and now it's taking me in. So now I'm in the Office 365 tenant as my partner accounts. If I look at my settings in here, I can see that this ext in my username here, that's indicating that this is an external account. My email address is peter@envisionit.com. Now, we're not currently bringing the profile information through. In fact, if we come back to the Azure AD portal, let's have a look at the profile here. One of the things that we're planning on doing is actually taking the profile fields that come from the registration and wiring them into Azure AD here. There's some more testing I need to do on the Microsoft side to see, does this profile information make it into Office 365 from a profile sync point of view? If you've worked in the SharePoint space for any period of time, user profile sync can be a major challenge in SharePoint as a general thing. But I've basically got my account in and through from that point of view. So if I come back to my main site here, so now I'm in the site as the internal user. You can see I've got my full Office 365 experience. I can go over to my mail, my calendar, my Delve, all those things through my subscription. But if I look back at the partner account here, I don't even see the app launcher here because all I have access to is SharePoint Online. That's the only one that I can bring an external user in. They can't use email or Skype for Business or Delve or other things. From that point of view, they can simply interact with whatever SharePoint team sites you've lit up for them. So that's really the end-to-end process through from that perspective. I know I'm getting tight on time here. Let me just have a look at what I've got left in my slide deck. So what I do want to do is a quick poll here. So I want to get a sense, now that people have a better understanding of what B2B is about, I want to understand how people see using Azure B2B. So let me just open this poll up here. So the obvious one, the topic that we've been talking about in this session here is to bring external users into your Office 365 and more specifically into your SharePoint Online. But I'm curious how many people are looking to provide single sign-on to other SaaS applications as well. Is there third-party applications? I'll show you some examples in a minute, like Ontario Association of Children Aid Societies, where they're not only bringing their external users into their SharePoint Online, but they're also bringing it into Desire to Learn, which is a third-party SaaS provider. Or is there your own Azure AD authenticated applications, whether those are on-premise or up in the cloud that you've built, and you want to provide single sign-on into that as well? Or how about the Azure application proxy? I'm curious, before we go too far down that, is that a workload that people see a lot of value to, that they've got traditional Windows authenticated applications on premise, and they want to be able to light those applications up to their external parties? I mean, the scenario that we're going to be using is our Team Foundation server. So TFS doesn't wire into Azure AD directly. It wants to use Windows authentication. But we want to bring our clients, our partners, into TFS to be able to look at their projects. So we can use Azure Application Proxy to provide that. They still sign in through their B2B accounts. They use their Windows credentials to then sign into TFS. But that's all transparent to them. They don't even really know that there's a Windows account under the hood there. Okay, so let me give you a bit more time just to close up that. If I can get everybody to submit on that, that would be awesome. Okay. It's actually quite interesting. I wasn't what I was expecting. So only about a quarter looking to bring external users into Office 365, but about 2/3 looking to use Azure AD to come into their own applications, whether those are on-premise or in the cloud. So maybe that's where we should put our focus from a next webinar point of view is, okay, well, how do you then wire up those Azure AD applications and provide access through Extranet User Manager and B2B into those? A few folks on the on-premise side, I still see that as an important workload. There's a lot of hybrid out there, so likely still going to pursue on that side of things. But that may change a bit in terms of what our directions are for follow-on webinars from here. So let me just hide that out. We've only got a couple minutes left. I mean, I did want to get a chance to show everybody some of the other sites that we've worked on. If we go to Sorry, I need to open multiple browsers here. One of the challenges with Office 365. I mentioned the OCAS example. So ocas.sharepoint.com is their Office 365 portal. It redirects to our login form. This is one of those examples where we're actually using our identity management against Office 365. Because they're a registered charity, they were able to request and be granted 8,000 E1 licenses to be able to use in their online portal. So there's the ability for folks to register through here. This is sort of a hybrid of auto approval and approval required. So depending on what I choose here, I pick an organization. Let's say I work for the Children's Aid Society of Toronto locally here. If I put in an email address that matches the email domain for Children's Aid Society of Toronto, then it's all going to work magically. I'll be auto approved and away I go. I just set my password and I'm into the portal. If instead I say, well, I'm from say an other organization and I put in my Outlook.com or Hotmail account or something different from that point of view, it will need to go through an approval process and you'll get an email generated much like we saw as I was going through my scenario. This actually was very successful for them. They were onboarding somewhere on the order of about 500 external users per day for a couple of months through earlier part of this year. They had a big push on to provide access not just to their portal, but to Desire to Learn, which is their training partner that we provide single sign-on into as well. So it's a great example from that point of view. Some of the other ones, Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, another charitable organization. If I come into their portal, this is a public website right now, but if I click on the members link, I get to our login form. And again, you can see the brand through there. I can come into the registration process. This one's interesting because all the registration is tied into Dynamics CRM. So it creates contact records in CRM for everybody that's registering, or it updates them if they already exist in there, and allows them to manage their profile through there. So those are a couple of examples. We've got lots more. Unfortunately, we don't have lots of time. So let me just wrap things up quickly here. From a next steps point of view, I mentioned Logan is our prime point of contact. So if you'd like more information, you'd like to dive deeper, maybe do a one-on-one technical demo, set up a hosted trial or an on-premise evaluation copy, by all means, reach out to Logan. He'll be following up following the webinar as well. If you're in either the San Francisco or Chicago area, the first full week of December, both Logan and myself will be at SPTechCon December 5th to 7th, which is the Monday to Wednesday, and then we'll be up in Chicago for SharePoint Fest December 8th to 9th. I'm actually going to be speaking on two topics, one running effective projects in Office 365, and the other on SharePoint Framework, electronic forms, and alternate SharePoint app approaches. So by all means, come check us out. We'll be there in the exhibitor hall as well. And then I mentioned from a follow-on point of view, the video and the presentation deck will be up on our extranetusermanager.com site. We'll send an email out to everybody as well, just to let them know when that's up there. It should be in the next day or so. So from there, I think I'm right at the noon hour. So thanks everybody for joining. Haven't had a chance to have a look at questions as we're going through. Certainly I'll debrief with Logan to see if there's anything we need to answer from that perspective, and we can go from there. So have a great rest of your day, and thanks for joining us on the webinar.